Many of you know her because I've been seeing the comments you've been placing on my post and reminders. So it's a very good thing that you already know what I mean when I say special. It's not like I'm just trying to use words outside of their context. So in fact, I say we have the legendary Danielle Stein Fairhurst. She's one of those who has consistently been in this financial modeling space. I think she's the largest personality I know in this space. She's written books. She's got a lot of resources that has helped a lot of us who got into this space not so many years ago. And so it's a very huge pleasure for us to have her, present to us, and the timing is one that it's a sacrifice for her in terms of we are about 10 hours apart, and so we are eating into what should be our family time and late into the night for her. So it's something that we are very, very grateful for, and she's prepared even resources to make it a very interactive one. I'll just read a bit about her profile so that you will get to know why I say she's a special guest as we have. So as you can see on the screen, I'm going to zoom. So as I'm reading it, you can also follow along. She's the principal of Plum Solutions based in Australia. She's the author of Using Excel for Business and Financial Modeling. The book I know her a lot more for is the popular Financial Modeling in Excel for Dummies. So she's written many books. She's got over 20 years worth of experience in this financial space, worked in companies and then before starting us and consulting for companies and across different industries. She, like I've said, she does things across different industries, Australia, and I think about 2 weeks ago, she was even having some training for people, like at the extreme ends of the planet. She's in Australia, and those ones who are in, I think, Brazil or so. So we are really, really honored to have her in our midst. She's also a very active person on the Financial Modeling Innovation Awards. She's one of the judging panel. She's on the judging panel. She's also active in the Model of. Many of us know Model of. It has been popular for so long. So, in fact, you are meeting one of the people who have been behind Model of. And without taking any more time, I'm going to call her up stage. I'm going to be sharing some of the resources she's been generous to share with us. I'm going to put all these links in the chat box. Also, she has shared with us the material for today's session. I'm going to put that in the chat box also. And she's very okay with us asking questions as she's going on with her presentation. So if you have questions, it would be nice if you raise your hand or if you notify me in the chat box, whichever you find convenient for you. At some intervals, she's going to pause and want to take all the questions. So please ask all your questions. In fact, I would say ask all your questions even beyond the scope of what she's presenting, because it's not a common thing for us to find someone of our level of experience and all. So please feel free to ask her any question within the confine of financial modeling, and I'm sure we will all learn from her answers. So Danielle, it's a pleasure. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can carry on from here, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to meet you finally. I've heard all about you. I've also followed you for quite some time, so it's wonderful to be here. And I was very excited to be here because I told my family I was visiting Africa today. So last week I was in the Caribbean, and last weekend I was in London for the Global Excel Summit, and it's fantastic to be in Africa today. So although the pandemic has made things very difficult for us in some ways, it is wonderful to be able to be here with you, and it's something that I probably would not have been able to do otherwise. So thank you so much for having me. So I'm just going to share my screen now, so you should be able to see my PowerPoint now. So this is me, and I'm going to sort of go through some of the things. I assume you can, hang on a minute, no, that is not what I intended to share. Okay, I knew I was going to screw this up. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so you should maybe Let's try that one. How's that? You should be able to see my PowerPoint slide. Yeah.
Yes.
So good. Okay. Do feel free to jump in, Michael, if I mess something up. I tend to use Zoom a lot more than I use Teams. So if I share the wrong thing or you can't see or you have a question, do certainly let me know. So I've got a couple of things to go over with you, but first of all, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So this is me. As Michael said, financial modeling is pretty much my world. It's what I live and breathe, what I've always done. So I've written these 2 books about financial modeling, I have I'm, as Michael and I are both actually approved training providers for FMI. So the next financial modelling exam is coming up on the 24th of April. And if you're interested in pursuing financial modelling as a career, I think it's a really good thing to have, is to become certified as a financial modeller. So that's something you should perhaps consider. But we are going to mainly be talking today about scenarios and sensitivity analysis. So what I thought I'd do is take you through a couple of different, so just look at all the different options that there are in Excel for running scenarios, basically. And I'm going to be, I've got a bit of a presentation just to sort of tell you the techniques, or to talk about the different techniques. But most importantly, I'm going to go through some of those techniques using Excel. So I have given you a copy of some of the files, and I think Michael has made a link available for you. So there are a number of files that I'll go over with you. But before we do that, I would like to I'm always interested to see what your definition is of a financial model. So I have kind of given a bit of a definition in this book, but I'm interested to see what you guys, what your definition of a financial model is. So you can either answer in the chat, although I'm not entirely sure whether I'm going to see the chat, or just unmute your microphones and tell me what your definition of a financial model is. I'm interested to know what you think.
Okay, I'm monitoring the chat box, and there are a lot of us that I know here, so I'm going to call your name out if you don't say something.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Don't be shy.
So let me start with a friend. So a friend shouldn't be angry that I'm calling him out. So, Ejale, please help us out. Just say something. So maybe others will be encouraged to say something. Who else am I close to here?
Okay, good morning, Michael. Good morning, Daniela.
Hello.
Okay, I will try with my understanding.
Okay.
Understand. Something you have that enables you to put input, and
I think your line is not making it easy for me to hear you.
Can't hear you very well, but I heard inputs, which is definitely absolutely true.
Okay. All right, another person I know. So Kazim Olawale, please help us say something.
What is your definition?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
Yeah. So I'm going to come from a bit of piecing it together. So for a model definitely tries to make us have assumptions and then see an output, and then being able to make decision off of that. So if I bring finance into it, then it definitely would mean having some financial assumptions put together, then under some scenarios, then getting out some output to make some financial decisions. That would be like maybe the purpose of the financial model, basically.
Yeah, absolutely true. Though the purpose of it is often to make the decisions, isn't it? So to have some sort of structure or a model that you can put inputs in and to be able to use to make decisions. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? I can see Amrit says a financial model is a dynamic Excel model. Yes, it's usually in Excel, capable of providing solutions, providing flexibility to be adaptable to different inputs. Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah, it's a solution, it's flexible, it's adaptable, you can have inputs, you can have outputs. To me, one of the most important definitions of a model is being able to have those inputs and have those outputs, and you change the inputs and the outputs change, and to have that sort of flexible and dynamic nature. So the definition that I kind of came across in the Financial Modeling for Dummies book is that it was a tool, usually in Excel, that displays possible solutions to real-world financial problems. And quite often you have an idea or a problem or something that you want to do. And in order to do it, you want to know what the impact of that is. And so you create a financial model to do that. And what I love so much about financial modeling is that it takes something that might be, just something that's a little bit nebulous or maybe just a bit of an idea and makes it tangible, because until you actually put it into Excel, you don't really know how you're going to achieve that. So often I'll say to a client, how do you, how are you going to achieve that new product? Like, who are you going to hire? How much are you going to pay them? When are they going to start? What sort of bonuses? All of those sorts of questions will actually take an idea and actually put it into a model. But what we're really talking about today is to do with the scenarios, and that is one of the fantastic things about creating a financial model is that you are able to use scenarios in it. But there's a bit of a difference between a spreadsheet and a financial model. I know we sometimes use them interchangeably. A spreadsheet could be, just about anything, but a financial model is firstly more structured. It's going to be dynamic, like we just talked about, inputs and outputs. It's flexible, dynamic. It has this kind of relationship between variables. Change the inputs and the outputs change as well. But most importantly, what we're talking about today is the hypothetical outcomes. So what I mean by that is scenario. So what would happen if we did this? So we were thinking about launching this new product, or we thought about expanding into this region, or we thought about opening a new factory. But what would happen if exchange rates changed? Or what would happen if we were not able to get the products to market as quickly as we thought, and we had to push everything back? So being able to do scenarios and sensitivity analysis is a really, really important part of financial modeling. Absolutely. So let's talk. See, this is sort of the 4 areas that I'd like to cover with you today. I'll say today, I was going to say tonight, but it's tonight for me. It's about 8 o'clock at night for me, but I know it's morning for you guys mostly. So the 4 things that I'd like to cover with you is firstly the difference between scenario, sensitivity, what is like, just a bit of difference in the terminology. Then I'll talk about the different methods of scenario analysis. Then we'll jump into some practical examples, and then I'll finish off with some advantages and disadvantages of each of those methods. So firstly, we'll talk about the differences between scenario, sensitivities, and what if analysis, or whether they're all, simply the same thing. So basically, sensitivities would be if you tweak 1 or 2 variables, whereas scenarios involve changing a large number of inputs. So what I see a lot of people do is that they finish their financial model. So they've got a beautiful financial model that they've put together, and then they save it and call it base case scenario, because that's what it is. And they'll make a couple of changes to it, and then they'll save that and call it best case scenario. And then they make a few more changes and they save it again and call it worst case scenario. And that's not a very effective way of building scenarios. Sensitivities, on the other hand, is when you say, well, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I do that? And you can just do them sort of one at a time, but we're going to have a look at a couple of techniques. So things like data tables make it a lot more effective to look at a whole lot of scenario sensitivities all simultaneously, basically. What if analysis pretty much just refers to either of them, what would happen if I do this, or what would happen if I do that. But really the difference between sensitivities and scenarios is just a sort of subtle difference, basically. So that is basically the difference. And the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is the technical methods of scenario analysis. But I'm going to stop for a sec and just see if anybody's got any questions or if anybody would like to contribute to this. Okay.
Any questions from anyone?
Okay, that's cool. All right, let's keep going. So the different methods of scenario analysis. So I thought I'll go over into Excel shortly and show you a couple of different ways of doing this. But probably the most common method of scenario selection that I'm sure you've seen done many times in financial models is this manual scenario selection, where you're just looking at one scenario at a time. And if you're sitting for the FMI exam in April, that's probably going to be the best method, is just doing a manual. You just do a drop down, best case scenario, base case scenario. That's all that they expect, is just a really simple, straightforward drop down. Best case, all the numbers change. Drop down, worst case, all the numbers change, like that. And to do that, you can either do a data validation drop-down box or a combo drop-down box. You can also do, I'm sure you guys might have used switches, perhaps, where you go 1, 2, 3. You could type in the number, and that's also a manual scenario selection. So you say select scenario 1, select scenario 2, that sort of thing. So you change the inputs, and then all of the calculations will change based on whatever you've input into that particular box. You can also use tick boxes and check boxes and things like that as well. So we'll actually, let's jump over into Excel now. I'll show it to you now. So I'm just going to jump over. You should be able to see my Excel. Can everybody see my Excel okay? So here's an example of a really, really simple model.
Hi, Danielle. It seems we're not seeing the Excel.
You can't see my Excel. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Let's give it another go. And how's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
And all right. Yeah, so in this example, just a really simple example of project calculation. So it comes from the dummies box, so it's pretty basic. So it's really just about looking at the different scenarios here. So if you, or really, it's just simply, do these costings include tax? Yes or no, because we've got our salary. So the way that we input it, you make it really straightforward. This is an assumption, or this is a hard-coded number, and this is a formula. So you just have a formula that just calculates based on what the assumptions are and based on the yes and the no. So we have a little drop down the bottom that says, do these costings include tax? Yes or no. So it's just a really simple off-on type switch. And then based on whatever you put in here, if you say no, then it's going to exclude all of it. And then you say yes, and it's going to include it. So just a really, really simple one. I'm sure you guys have used these before, but if you go into data validation, you can allow a list, and then that just makes a yes or a no. And that's probably the most common way that I do scenario analysis, is just doing a really, really simple data validation drop down. The other way of doing a drop down is using a combo box. So that's one that looks like that, yeah? And that's just using the developer tab, and you just go into insert, and it's a combo box, and it looks like that. So you can just, that's a really, really big one. So that's how you would build a combo box. So you would say best case, base case, worst case, and you would use that to drive your model. So you'd need to go into format control. you'd need to give it the input. So you'd say best case, base case, worst case, and then you give it the cell link, which is going to be your output. So it says get your data from cells D8 to D10. So it'll give you the option best case, base case, worst case. If you choose number 1, it'll give you a 1. Choose number 2, it'll give you 2. And then, of course, you could do a calculation based on that. So if I go to best case, that's going to be number 1. So best case is number 1. And then let's say over here, I wanted to pick up, what formula would you guys use? If I wanted to use a formula that's going to pick up the first price, there's probably about 6 different functions you could use. Anybody want to tell me which function I should use for that one? So I want to look down here and pick up number 1. Which one would you use?
I think a match would be fine.
A match, yeah. A match will give me the position, yes.
So
yep.
index match.
Yeah, index. Yeah, I actually probably don't even. I would probably just go straight with an index actually, because I could just go index like that, and it'll give me.
Exactly.
Straight. Yeah, yeah. So really, really simple way of doing that. Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to jump back into my slides now. You should be able to see back now to where I was before. So that's just I just wanted to show you a couple of options for doing the manual scenarios. So data validation versus combo. Now, Excel has created something called Scenario Manager, which has been around forever. And it sounds really good, doesn't it? It's not really that great. Do you ever use a Scenario Manager, Michael? Are you a fan of it? You know what I mean by the Scenario Manager?
Yes, but I don't use it for financial modeling. It's not dynamic because of the...
Yeah. Yeah, it's this one here under, can you see my Excel? So under what if analysis, yeah. So you've got goal seek, which is great. You've got data tables, which is great. And scenario manager, it sounds great, like it's got a great name, but I don't really find it that helpful. So like if you've got an example here and you go what if analysis, and you have to actually go into the scenario manager, and then you would show it like that. So you'd say best case, show. Did you see all the numbers change? And then go base case, and then show, and then worst case, and then show like that. The summary is quite cool though. Do you use that one, Michael?
That's even what I use more of. So whenever I use it, it's to end up in the summary. Then people get to complain, oh, what if I change the logic the other side? Does it flow directly here? Or find it doesn't. You have to regenerate the summary. Yeah,
I guess it bothers me that it's hard coded. So I don't use Scenario Manager terribly much. So we'll skip. I won't spend too much time on that one, but we might jump into the data tables, because the data tables sort of does something similar to what that Scenario Manager does, what we're trying to do, but it's a lot more dynamic. So if I jump over to data table, which is that one there, there's a couple of little instructions. If you haven't done a data table before, they're a little bit fiddly. So I've just put some instructions onto that sheet if you want to use this for reference afterwards, so you can kind of work out how it works. So let's say, for example, you've got a loan of $350,000. You want to borrow $350,000 at 7.5% over 25 years. And you wanted to do this is more of a sensitivity analysis than a scenario. So a scenario would be like all the inputs, like a whole lot of inputs might change. Whereas with a sensitivity, you'd say, what would happen if this one thing changed? So what if my interest rate was 6%? Oh, okay, that's interesting. What if it was 6.5%? Oh, what if it was only 3%? Ah, okay. And you can see all of it changing like that. Whereas with a data table, you can do the whole thing at once. So you'd say, link it to there, and you'd say, what would my interest rate be? Let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see it. And then if I go into my data table, and I'd say, what would that repayment be if my interest rate was 6%, 6.5%, 7%, 7.5%, 8%. So it kind of scrolls through it like that. Says okay, like that. So it shows you all simultaneously. So whereas with the drop down, you can only see one at a time, whereas with this one, it does them all simultaneously.
for different users.
Sorry, I have to go find out who that is. I'm mute.
I think somebody's driving. That's better. Okay, so let's have a look now with the two-way data tab. So that was just one way. This one was with two ways. If you wanted to do term of the loan that way and interest rate that way, perhaps you do it like that. Highlight the whole lot. And again, data table row. And I think the trickiest, I don't know about you, Michael, but I find these, I have to think twice about whether it's the row input cell or whether it's the column input cell. Do you find that tricky?
Yes, the naming kinds of
yeah. Yeah, you got to get it round the right way because the row is term of the loan and the column is going to be the interest rate. So it's just figuring out which is which, because if you get it wrong, it doesn't work. So the row is going to be the term of the loan, which is that one there. And then the column is going to be that one there. There we go. And so that gives you all of the possible variations of what the output would be in this model. And I have given you a completed version there as well. The other thing I quite like doing here, of course, is to do some conditional formatting with some color scales, which I think kind of adds a little bit of visual, a little bit of extra visual to it. So if I go into the edit rule, so if I go into the, I usually just do it with a two-tone. So I just went into color scales and did the two-tone like that, and then manage rules, edit rule, and then just grab maybe one of the colors like that. So I think that looks just makes it look a little bit nicer. Any questions with that one? So nothing terribly out of the ordinary with that one. So that was data table. So that's another method of scenario or sensitivity analysis in Excel. I'm going to jump in now to a goal seek. So let's say if I jump to here, going back to that example here where we were doing the project days and the annual days is 260, and let's say that is my total cost, and you get into the meeting and your project manager says, no, I'm sorry, we do not have $146,000 to spend on this project. You are going to have to cut back your number of days, and I can only afford to spend $125,000. So we are going to run a goal seek on that. So we would say, what if analysis goal seek, and we'd go to here and say the value, you have to type it in by changing the number of days, and that will give me exactly the number of days, and we probably would round it, say 51, so it'll give you something that's close, because obviously you're not going to round it to that much detail there. Whereas if I change it back now to 60, what do you guys think of that as a scenario or sensitivity analysis tool? It's powerful, isn't it? But as a tool, it's quite difficult to run, you know, because next time I say, oh, hang on, how did I do that? Which one was the input and which one was the output? I find that one quite technically difficult. So what I often do is, I'm going to go to another example here. This is a similar example, except that we're doing a break-even analysis. So we're saying, this is my fixed cost, this is my selling price, this is my number of units, and that's my profitability. So we want to say, what is my break-even point? And goal seek is really useful for break even as well. So if I run another goal seek, and if I were to say this time I want to make that a 0 by changing the number of units like that, so it runs through and gives me exactly a 0, except again I have to remember which one is the input. So what I've done here, and I've actually prepared it for you already, is running a, it's actually got a macro on it, and I don't know if that macro is actually, does not look like it's working. Assign macro. It should be, it's broken. Okay, there we go. If that breaks, it was when I put it onto the Google Drive, I think it broke. But if it breaks, you can just go right click, assign macro, and let's see if that works. If I say run, there we go. So what that does, it's just a really, really simple macro, but every time I hit that button, it's going to run the break even. So I can change that back to something else, run break even. So I've given you a copy of this. You can try it out for yourself if you like. Or I can say 6,000, 60,000, run break even. It's always going to run it back to that number, or even more than that. If I were to say, actually, my selling price is going to be 135 instead, run break even. So it comes up with a different number. And the way that I did that was just a really, really simple record macro, run the goal seek, and then stop recording. So super, super simple. And you can go in and see exactly what that does there. You can see that that is my code. So it's just a very, very simple macro. The other thing that you guys who are familiar with using macros, you probably notice that C16 is not very smart. C11, that's not very smart either. So you probably notice that if I were to insert an extra row in here and then run my break even, the whole thing, is going to fall over. And so you can see the reason for that is because I've used C16 and it's always going to use to look at C16. Anybody come across this problem before? Anybody know how to fix it? No? Anybody use named ranges? So if I were to use a name here and say, if I call this one units, so that would be that's my name there. And if I call that one profit, so instead of C16 and C11, I use these names. So if I say, call that profit, and now when I go into my macro, instead of saying C16, I call that profit, yeah? And then if I say change your units so that your profit is 0, it's basically what that code is. I'm sorry, I can't make that any bigger. Hang on, let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. No, that's not going to work.
Well, it's kind of visible. See it.
Is that bigger?
Okay, yes, it is. Okay, then it's back to the way it was. But I think because I have a small screen and I still see it. So, okay, this is great. It's great, yes.
So I have given you a copy of this file, so you'll be able to go into the code and see how that works. So what I did was created a named range for profit and a named range for unit, and then I replaced the cell reference of C11 and C16 with those names, basically, to stop that from happening.
Sorry, let me just quickly go work on that.
Everybody okay?
Okay, great. Let me know when you're ready for questions. I think we have, shall I say 1 or 2 already?
Okay, yeah, sure. Let me just finish up with that one. Is everybody okay with that exercise there? So let me just run it again and make sure. Oh, no, it's not working. Debug, let me have a look. I just want to debug it and see what's happened. So profit, goal seek is 0, changing, so units. I think I might have called it units. I think it was just an extra. Let me just get that working. There we go, that's better. Okay, yeah, because I called that one is units and I called that one price and I called it units. So that way, if I were to insert an extra row in there, it is not going to fall over. There we go, much better. Okay, so it's much more flexible if you are going to use a macro for something like that, to use a named range instead of a relative reference.
Sorry,
so,
can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. I might just stop.
So if you wanted to change 2 variables.
Yes.
That is at once with the goal seek. Is that possible as well? Because you're only changing one with one.
Yeah, it's only the goal seek will only do one. It says change one variable. I often will have a whole lot of dependencies around that one variable. So you can have like a very complex financial model, and as long as there is a direct link between the input and the output, then it will work. But still, it's only one single input. You can also use Solver, which is a more complex way of doing it. So Solver will allow you to have multiple inputs, and it will put parameters around it. So it'll say, change that cell, but only make sure that this cell is not less than 0 or things like that. So that's a different method using Solver.
Okay, cheers.
Okay.
Okay, just having a look at the questions now.
Ramon, do you want to also read your question? I mean, ask your question. There's someone who has a question and you typed it before.
Okay. I don't know. Okay. My question is around the tools. A way you can kind of broadly summarize how to categorize the use cases for these tools. Most startups.
Do you mean how do you decide which method to use? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like that. I think mostly for startups, it's a long way because they can't fit it into what they can relate with, and that way, when they have a problem solved, they know exactly what to relate with, and from there, and start seeing how to go about solving the problem. Just wanted to know.
Sorry, I missed that last. I missed the last bit.
So the question is just, do you have a way of kind of categorizing, say, okay, for this type of problem, pick this tool to solve your problem? So just a broad way of categorizing the cases for each of the tools.
Yeah, I didn't quite follow that last bit, but I'll try to answer the question. I think what you're asking is, in what situation would you use different methods?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't really depend on the model or the industry. It doesn't really matter so much. It's more about the technical, what you want to show. So I might just jump to answer that question. I might just jump to one of my other slides. I'll just share my screen where the sort of advantages and disadvantages of the different methods of the manual scenario analysis is there's never really a reason not to use manual scenario analysis from a technical perspective, because it's really, really easy to build and it's really easy for other people to understand. And you can have a whole lot of inputs and outputs, which is great. But the disadvantage is that you can't look at them side by side. So you can't, like you say, best case, and then everything changes. And then you say base case, and then everything changes again. And you're like, oh, hang on a minute, what was that number over there? So you can't see them side by side. And so I think, in answer to your question, Ramon, is if you need to see a scenario side by side, I wouldn't use the manual scenario analysis, or I would use some kind of method, either a type of data table or a macro solution where you would run the scenarios, which is not ideal. It's not ideal having to run it if you want to see them side by side. I usually just do it manually at the end, which is also not ideal. But generally, I just would use it when you need to just look at them one at a time. And then with the data tables are great because when you want to see them simultaneously, which is great for sensitivity analysis. But the problem is that it's tricky. It's quite difficult for beginners to use, and the inputs and outputs do need to be on the same page. You can only show one or two variables, and it can slow down the calculations. So that's a reason not to use data tables. So think about which of those solutions might be best for you. So does that answer your question, Ramon?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Was there any other questions before we move on?
Yes, there is. So, Ediali, I can see your hand up. So please ask your question.
Okay. My question is this. Is it advisable to go with like 3, 4, 5 scenario? Okay, so can I change like 3, 4, 5 variables in a scenario analysis? And if it's allowed or advisable, what kind of tool can I use? So if I have a model, can I change up to 3, 4, 5, 6 inputs or variables in a scenario analysis? And what is the best tool to use?
Yeah, if you have a large number of variables, I'd say probably the manual drop down, because you can have, if you design, quite often the model will be all of your inputs, all of your assumptions are in one big long column, and then next to it you have scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 4, like that. And then it's a really straightforward process to have it automatically change. So you change the drop down and then it looks along and picks up the correct scenario. So let me just show you an example. So I have given you a couple of example models. I might just share. Here we go. Okay, so you should be able to see my Explorer now. So some of the examples that I've given you, this one, I might jump to the completed version. So this is actually a case study that comes from this book. So the instructions and the files are there, but I've given you the completed version just so you can see how it works. And it's a fairly simple method of looking at a case study of how to build it. So generally, so here we've got only 3. But you could, it doesn't have to be 3. I've done 3 just to keep it really, really simple. But you could have, you could have it like, I could go insert here and I could say, scenario 1, 2, all the way down like that. And that could be all of the options there. So you can see that I've created a drop down using but because I've used a data validation drop-down box with the source, as I've entered it, it's all just, so you could have like a dozen, you could have 20, you could have 50, probably not 50, wouldn't probably be a good idea, different scenarios. And then what that then does is that all of your assumptions, so this becomes the driver. So this is your active range and this is changing, and this uses a formula. So I've used a sum if formula. You could have used an X lookup or a V lookup or a if or an index match or anything like that to pick it up, and it just looks down the column and just picks up the corresponding assumption that goes into your inputs and then drives your model, so that when I change my drop down box to worst case, for example, it changes and that absolutely drives everything as well. And similarly with that one, it's a combo box, and then there's also a data table solution as well. So just examples there. So I hope that answers your question with that one. So any other questions, or shall I move on to something else?
Yes, I think we can. Thank you.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, then I will just jump back to share my screen. And yeah, so one thing that you really should remember is that there can only be one outcome and it will be wrong. So the thing that's really important to remember with financial models is that you've built the model and it can be really, really complex, but really the model is only as good as the inputs that go into the model or the assumptions that go into it. And you can have the most beautifully designed and laid out model in the world, but if the inputs and the assumptions that go into it are rubbish, then the outputs will be rubbish as well. So it's garbage in and garbage out. And people think that by doing lots and lots of scenarios, it's going to insulate your model from risk, but really it doesn't, because there can only be one outcome, and you know that the only thing that you know for sure about your model is that whatever your model says will most certainly be wrong. It's just as how wrong it might be. If you are interested in risk, by the way, we do have another meetup coming up on Wednesday night. We'll be talking a little bit more about model risk. But before we jump in, I might just jump back to the different technical methods, because there was one just at the bottom here that you might have heard of, or you might have come across before, and that is Monte Carlo or stochastic simulations. And that is a much more, what we've been talking about here, certainly the first couple were fairly simplistic, so you change the inputs and the outputs change. Monte Carlo is a much more complex statistical method of running scenario analysis in financial models. Basically, they test so what we've done in the past with the scenarios, we say, well, what if this changed, or what if this changed, and we're just looking at one scenario. What Monte Carlo will do, will actually test the model using thousands of variables, and look at the probability of, or look at the distribution of the probability of a certain outcome occurring. So I thought I might just show you briefly an example. Generally, we use other software for that. So we would use, there's a couple of really good bits of software that will run Monte Carlo for you. Has anybody ever done this in Excel? So Michael, have you ever attempted a Monte Carlo simulation in Excel?
Yes.
Yeah, how does it go?
I had to do a bit of VBA then.
Did you?
So
okay.
I had to use norm inverse so as to get like a normal distribution, and sometimes maybe for things that are like a triangle, like minimax, mid, but I had to use VBA to reduce the amount of things I had to write on the spreadsheet. But it wasn't.
Okay.
It was a lot of work that I had to go look for an external tool like an add-in to get it done reliably and faster.
Cool. I thought I've got an example here, which is the break-even example with just a very rudimentary method of sort of describing what Monte Carlo would do. I haven't used VBA. I've done 1,000 iterations here. So I've run down a data table with 1,000 iterations. And I think you mentioned you used the norm.imv, did you say? Was that if I make that a little bit bigger, Michael, you can maybe see it. Is that the? And
that's the one I use a lot. Exactly. Yeah. To get out a normal distribution, yes.
Yeah, so what it does is it assumes a normal distribution curve. It says if my mean was 5,000 kgs, so that's my sort of average, and then the standard deviation was 1,500, assuming a normal distribution curve, it runs this simulation here. And then what it does is basically use brute force and run. So I've used that linking to the output here. So we say, what is the likelihood of it becoming a profit? So we want to work out what is the probability of it being a profit, or what's the probability of it being a loss. So I've actually run that through the data table like 1,000 times, and you can see there's one loss here and one loss here. And if I were to just use so it uses actually a random function. So rand, open bracket, close bracket, gives you a random variable between 0 and 1. So it's basically going to just keep calculating. So if I hit FR, I got one already, but it's quite hard to get it to give you a there we go. Yeah. So it's quite hard to give you a negative value there. So it's what you're working out here is the probability of the model actually making a loss. So I've used a count if, running it through and say how many times do these iterations give me a value greater than 0, and how many times do they give you a value that's less than 0? and then you can sort of work out the percentage. So that's a sort of much more statistical method of doing scenario analysis. So I just wanted to sort of briefly show you that that as a solution there. So any questions? Because that's pretty much what I was planning to cover with you, which that gives us a little bit of time for questions now. So.
Okay. You'll see I have to turn back on my video because at the question and answer time, I also have questions. But first of all, I want to get questions from the general house. So any questions from everyone?
Saying that they use a software called Palisade at Risk. Yes, that is probably one of the most common tools for Monte Carlo simulations.
I guess people are thinking about their questions.
Well, if you maybe give everybody a chance to think about their questions, and was there something you wanted to talk about, Michael? What's your opinion on these scenario analyses?
Oh, great. And I like the fact that you shared with us the files I had. So a lot of, even someone who wasn't able to access the chat messaged me to let him get the file. So people really appreciate that. We're grateful for that. I want to call out some people who I know who have reached out prior to your session saying they want to get some insights. So Mr. T, Taiwo, please, did you get some insights to what you would use in your own? He works in supply chain and he says what you're going to talk about are things he can apply in his own space. Are you able to unmute and maybe let us know if you've gotten some insights that will be useful, or you want her to help you with some ideas of how you can further adapt this to your supply chain? While I'm doing that, other people I know who. So, Mr. Diolu, I know you've been during the whole session. Anything, Mr. Saka, Mr. Pardon that we use a lot of Mr. in Nigeria here. It's just, for me as a trainer, it's become a bad habit. I'm learning to let go of it. So it's just okay.
In the meantime, I might just, I've got a slide to show you the meetups that we've got coming up. So those were the one I mentioned was the one about model risk scoring. So that's coming up on Wednesday night. So if people are interested in financial modelling risk, so Ian Bennett is the head of deals modelling at PwC here in Sydney, and one of his colleagues is going to be presenting that. Actually, tomorrow, before that, we've got the group called Women in Financial Modelling. So if there are any ladies here, we'd love to see you tomorrow. So you can find all of the links to sign up are going to be at that there. We've also got a panel for the FMI exam. So anybody who's interested in doing the FMI exam, and then we've got another one about cash flow waterfall coming up in March. So yeah, lots of meetups there.
I've put the link. I'm going to post it now, but that very link to the Meetups page, I've put it in the chat box. So
that one, yeah.
Yes, I have now. So I guess everybody should be able to follow.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
My name is Adiolu.
Yes,
I want to say, first of all, Michael, thank you for bringing us this week in, week out. Really appreciate it. And Danielle, thank you for making time out today. Okay, I'm a finance professional. In all honesty, I use Excel to the medium level. My financial modeling skills is not yet up top notch there. But in recent times, you want to move your cheese to the next level. You want to maybe get some new jobs, new offers. What I see these days is must be good in financial modeling and co. So it tends to increase my interest now. So I've been trying to go back and forth and try and say, okay, this financial model, let me even decrypt it and make it much simpler. But what we've done so far today is giving me leverage to serve as a foundation to move and try and understand it better. So I want to say a big thank you. And at every point in time, I know that once in a while, when I have issues with my financial modeling, I always call on Michael to say, Michael, how do we go about this? And it's always been helpful. Thank you a lot for everything. Thanks.
You're welcome. I think it's really important to, you don't have to be an expert in all the different methods, but I think giving you that overview of being able to talk the language. So when you get into an interview, to be able to have a conversation with someone about scenarios and sensitivities and how that's important in a financial model, I think it's good to have that language to talk about it with someone.
Great. And there's also a friend, a very close friend who I know, I was really surprised when he joined in. I know there's something he's doing that he's been trying to see how to apply some of what you've said. Demilade, is there anything you want to ask? You know, maybe she can give you some ideas to how you can take some of these and put in what you're working on. There's a new stuff like a company is working with and is having to set in place some of these scenarios. Are you able to unmute and say something where you are? Okay, maybe he's not. All right, so whenever he unmutes and says that, okay, yeah? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Michael. I have a question on the Monte Carlos. Is there a way to see another example of it being used Monte Carlos to be something they use to build atomic bombs, and it is done gambling, and it has stuff with gambling and all that fancy stuff. But is there any other example, like in terms of finding maybe I'd say some predictive sort of analytics that goes with Monte Carlos, and to what extent can it predict?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you, Michael?
What I'm asking is the question is, what else can Monte Carlos? Because you gave an example of Monte Carlos being used in break-even analysis. So is there another example, another use case where we can look at how it's being used, maybe for predictive analytics or predictions or
the purpose is really just to give you some comfort around, because when you build you'll see one of the examples that I gave you, the case study, you could either have it'll say, we're going to make a profit of $5 million, or we're going to make a loss of $600,000. It could be anything in between, and it just gives you a bit more comfort or predictability around what the outcome is most likely to be. Rather than, because if you try to do a valuation of a company and it says your company's worth anywhere between nothing and $10 million, like, well, yeah, I knew that. That's not telling me anything that I didn't know. Whereas if you do a bit of this kind of techniques, it gives you a bit more predictability about it. Do you have any examples, Michael? Maybe Michael has some examples that he's worked on. Sorry.
Okay. Well, exactly what you said. Just that. Sam, we are breaking up. We can't. Are you able to type it in the chat?
Okay.
Oh.
I can't. I didn't follow that.
Okay, if you can type in the chat box, because we have a few more minutes. So, but you said if I have exactly what you've said, just to point out that also exactly what you said, $0 and $10 million. But then with the Monte Carlo, we can be able to say there's a 95% chance it's between this range. So it kind of puts a weightings to the scenarios. So the best case, the worst case, the base case kind of feels like they have equal weighting when we do it the normal way. But then with the Monte Carlo, one can be able to say, okay, this is the likelihood, exactly what you've said. So I'm just saying what you've said, maybe in just another way, maybe people can get it. So at this juncture, I want to ask 2 more questions, and that will be the end. I think we've taken the 1 hour. I hope it's okay if we take some 4 more minutes for you to answer the questions.
Sure.
Okay, great. So question number 1 is, we are really interested in getting to know, on a very much more personal way, your journey, so far from, I don't know how far back you want to go. Maybe your interest started from, I don't know, maybe while you were even at the age of 1 or 2, I don't know, because I've seen some people who, their interest in what they do right now started really almost close to when they were still, suckling. So we want to know that, because we find it really inspiring to see how legends, get to be where they are. So that's the question number 1.
So how did I first start getting interested in financial modeling? Is that, yeah? Well, I just thought it's all I've ever done. I started in investment banking in London, and I'm Australian, and I went traveling, and when I had a background in, I did a business and finance degree, and then ended up working in investment banking, and then just got, it's like Excel, and just always, that was it, just always worked in Excel in that way. It was just love at first sight. It's Valentine's Day today.
That is true. So that's like you giving us a val gift for this session, Yeah. Maybe just to draw out some more, few more sentences from you for that question. So if I would, put it this way too, that over your career, is there 1 or 2 experiences that really stands out, that, every time you remember those experiences or that experience, it's something that's really way different from anything. So it's more like, there's a word someone used around, but more, it could be on a positive side. It could be something you saw, you did, and the impact was so huge, and it stays in your mind in that very big way. And it could be something on the not so good side, maybe mistakes you've seen people do, and you're always like, this is something one should know not to do. And so are there any of those kind of, maybe 1 or 2 that you've seen?
Yes, for me, yeah. I mean, it's I guess as a consultant, I've worked for lots of different people and different organizations and seen lots of different situations. And one of the things that I love so much about Excel and financial modeling is that it's so applicable to so many different situations. And I just feel so grateful that I've had the opportunity to see different situations. And I think that I truly believe it's one of the best things that you can do for your career is to get really good Excel skills and really good financial modeling skills. I think it's something that no matter where you are in the world, you can apply that. I was working on a project in Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, and I eventually was not able to get into the country because at that time they were not allowing women to visas. It was quite difficult to get in, and I was working on a really large budget project, and we were doing it all in Excel. There was like 4,000 employees across the globe, and we were having to pull everything together into Excel. And of course, I had to start from scratch. Well, they had models, but they had to be rebuilt. And so, of course, I built lots and lots of error checks into the models and made it reusable. So that where you have a date, which is a date is a variable, and then all of the dates flow from there. And we built the budget, and then the next year there was a lot of changes, and so we did the budget all over again. And because I couldn't get into the country, they would come to Singapore, or we would meet in Bahrain, or we would do it. I mean, back then we didn't really do this virtual thing. Would have been a lot easier. We did a little bit of video conferencing, but not a lot. We would meet the budget meetings for that, and then finally 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, I did some training in Riyadh, and I called them and I said, "Hey, I'm in town. This is great." And so we got together, and I said, "I haven't heard from you for a little while. What's happening with all your spreadsheets and your budgets and and everything. And they said, it's great because every year, all we have to do is we just change the one day to the beginning and everything just flows right throughout the model. So they didn't call me back because the models were just being used over and over again. So I think it's something that's a really good skill because, but yeah, as a consultant, you're not needed anymore. So I guess it was a bad story because they didn't need me anymore. But the good thing is that the model was something that is can be reused and that the client is getting value out of it years and years later. And that's what's so powerful about financial modeling and having good Excel skills.
Great. So the last one is your advice for someone, just starting right now.
For someone starting right now, having good financial modeling skills, obviously, is just a really, really good skill to have, definitely. Advice for starting now, I think try to get as much practical experience as you can, because modeling, I shouldn't say this because I have written 2 books, but financial modeling is not something that you can just read about. Yes, it's going to be helpful to read about it, but it's very much a practical skill. And so if you could try to get as much practical experience as you can, that's going to be the most valuable thing for your career, because when you get into an interview, they don't care about how many training courses you went on or how many books you read. They care about how many financial models that you built. That's the experience that they're going to care about. And they're such great, I know if you don't have a job or if you haven't started work yet and you want to get into financial modeling, there are tons of opportunities to do that. If you've got a job, try to get a chance to build financial models in your work. But there's things like the Financial Modeling World Cup. So we mentioned Modeloff. I remember you mentioned Modeloff because it was I was on the Diversity Council for it. But Modeloff is not competing anymore. But the Financial Modeling World Cup is running every month. So that the next one is next weekend. So that's a really good opportunity to test your financial modeling skills and to get some practical experience. It's hard though. The Financial Modeling World Cup is not for beginners. So when you get a bit more experience, give it a go. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to cheat. I said just one question, but then something occurred that, you'll be the great person to ask, what do you think about the future? So there's so many things coming up about the death of Excel, like Excel is coming to an end. There's always, every year people keep giving reasons why people will stop using Excel. And for financial modeling, I don't know what other tool we can. And then also too, there are so many software companies coming up with things that says can automate us away. Like you don't need to have a financial modeler anymore. You just, as a company, you plug in your stuff and those tools will do all of these. What do you think about the future and all these tools and what you worry about?
I know a lot of people have been saying for years that Excel is going to be taken over by other software, and it hasn't happened yet, and I can't see it happening in the future. I still think that your career is still going to be very much used. Is Excel is what you're going to still be using for the foreseeable future, as far as I can see, just because of its flexibility. And Microsoft have really adapted it so much to make it handle big data, to handle business intelligence, to all of these new things that are so important. They've made Excel relevant. They just keep bringing out new features all the time. So I can't see a time when it's not going to be really important for your career to have really good Excel skills. I think that's probably number one. Of course, Excel skills and financial modeling skills are 2 very different things, but it's hard to build a financial model without really good Excel skills. So you kind of need to work on both.
Okay, thank you. More questions keep coming, but I don't want to use more than the time that you've given. Maybe one other day, I don't know, if not this year, maybe another year. We'll be happy to have you. Maybe you can even talk about project finance or something a bit not too common that people get confused about.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to see you at the other meetups that we've got running this week as well.
Yes.
So I'll
put the link up. I'm going to reshare the link again, and also I'll see which one I can even join into. Although you've said there is one that only ladies should join, so I'll look for the other one that I can join.
Yeah, that's on the link also. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you as a speaker as well sometime. So we'll have to get you as well.
It'll be a pleasure. Okay. So thank you, and at this juncture we want to draw everything to a close, and again I can see people already saying the thank you to you, but I wanted to know we greatly appreciate this, and I'm even glad that we got at a point we had 33 people. So Nigeria were very religious, so when I get this number on a day that is and a time that it's the time people are at church, it means that a lot of people really want to be here.
Of course, it's Sunday morning for you. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's just once in a while, so I'm sure God is gonna be.
Well, I hope that for people who were able to catch the recording,
yes, I'm gonna do the recorded. I'm gonna replay the recording. For a lot of people have messaged me that they are not able to join because of the timing, but I was really amazed by how many people joined. So that means a lot of people really looked forward to your session and they stayed to the end, and I'm so very grateful for that. And I want to say thank you, and we hope maybe one other day this year or next year we're able to bring you again. So thank you very much.
And sometime I will be there in person one day.
That would be another good thing for us. So thank you very much, and have a nice week. And to everybody, thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.